We were teenage girls. We were just growing up. We were still developing our hormones, at that age. So
It was the kind of rock alliance fans thought would last forever, or so it seemed. But now, years later, Lita Ford finally dares to reveal the truth, her voice tinged with a mix of hurt and disbelief. She remembers the early days when she, the blazing queen of hard rock, and Ozzy Osbourne, the wild prince of heavy metal, ruled stages together and plunged headfirst into the chaos of the music world. They toured side by side, partied until sunrise, and witnessed the rawest, most unhinged moments rock had to offer. Yet behind the flashbulbs and the roaring applause, Lita says there was a darkness creeping in, a darkness born from egos clashing, unpredictable outbursts, and a volatile storm that seemed to follow Ozzy wherever he went. What the world saw as an unshakable bond was, in truth, a fragile connection cracking under the weight of betrayal, frightening mood swings, and shocking scenes that left even the hardest rock veterans stunned. This wasn't just a friendship on the rocks. It was a slow-motion collapse into chaos that Lita claims she can never forget. Ozzy Osbourne was never a stranger to trouble. He was practically its embodiment. Long before the conflicts with Lita came to light, he was trailed by a relentless storm of scandals that clung to him like a shadow he could never outrun. Picture alcohol-fueled rampages that ended with smashed dressing rooms, screaming matches that spilled into the streets, and drunken outbursts that turned violent in full view of horrified bystanders. Backstage feuds often exploded without warning, sometimes over petty insults, other times over deep-seated grudges that had been simmering for years. Business deals collapsed under the weight of paranoia and mistrust, with managers and promoters walking away mid-negotiation, muttering that Ozzy was simply too volatile to handle. His reputation for chaos wasn't just part of the rock and roll mythos. It was a daily reality. By the time his clashes with Lita began, Ozzy had already scorched a path through the music world, leaving behind broken friendships, betrayed collaborators, and legendary bands in tatters. Musicians who once idolized him swore never to share a stage with him again. Others quietly admitted they admired his talent, but feared the collateral damage that came with getting too close. In Ozzy's wake lay a trail of burned bridges, bitter enemies, and a legacy of turbulence that no amount of apologies or reconciliations could fully erase. When Lita Ford stepped into Ozzy's world, she didn't just join a bandmate, she walked straight into the center of a hurricane. Their disagreements weren't simply creative disputes over riffs or set lists. They were raw, emotional, and deeply personal. On stage, Ozzy's volatile energy could turn from electrifying to catastrophic in a heartbeat.
he wrote the songs, he sang on the songs, he sent out the tracks to this guy he was working with.
He'd miss cues, change songs mid-performance, or launch into bizarre rants that left Lita scrambling to hold the show together. Off-stage, the man who could be disarmingly charming over a drink could minutes later erupt into furious tirades, smashing furniture or storming out of rehearsals. Arguments often ignited like gunpowder, exploding into full-blown shouting matches that reverberated through dressing rooms and backstage corridors. Crew members learned to scatter when voices rose, knowing that in Ozzy's world, words could quickly escalate into dangerous outbursts. More than once, rehearsals ended with slammed doors and instruments abandoned mid-song, leaving the air heavy with tension. The deeper Lita was pulled into Ozzy's orbit, the more she saw the darker undercurrents. His erratic mood swings, the simmering resentments, and the way his self-destructive impulses bled into every relationship around him. It wasn't just the toll it took on her, it was the ripple effect that drained everyone in his circle, from roadies to close friends, until the entire atmosphere felt like it could combust at any moment. Ozzy's conflicts didn't stop with Lita, far from it. He seemed almost magnetically drawn to discord, and no circle was immune. With Black Sabbath, he waged years-long battles over creative control and personal grudges. Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward all carry scars from verbal explosions, sabotaged rehearsals, and tours derailed by late-night disappearances. record producers whispered about him vanishing for entire weekends before crucial recording dates, or staggering in so intoxicated that the day's work dissolved into chaos. Beyond his inner circle, Ozzy became entangled in high-profile spats with fellow metal titans. He famously locked horns with Dave Mustaine over tour politics, clashed bitterly with Iron Maiden during festival lineups, sometimes over set times, other times over perceived disrespect, and traded venomous barbs with Motley Crue's Nikki Sixx over backstage anarchy. His quarrels spilled into rivalries with Judas Priest over sound equipment, sabotage rumors, accusations against AC/DC over stolen stage ideas, and icy tension with Metallica after offhand insults snowballed into years of awkward avoidance. Even artists outside the heavy metal sphere weren't spared. Pop stars, punk icons, and blues legends alike recalled the sting of his temper or the frustration of broken promises. Ozzy could be charming and generous one week, then unpredictable and merciless the next, apologizing with grand gestures only to reignite the feud later. It seemed Ozzy's path was littered with either fragile truces or bridges burned so thoroughly they could never be rebuilt. Ozzy's temper and unpredictability weren't confined to private backstage areas. There were notorious on-stage incidents where he hurled microphones at photographers, shoved security staff, and even confronted unruly audience members head-on. At times, his outbursts turned concerts into near-oats, forcing promoters to cut shows short. Rivalries with other rock icons often erupted without warning. Festival lineups became battlegrounds, with Ozzy trading public insults and private threats that kept the rock press buzzing for months. He feuded openly with peers like Bruce Dickinson over perceived slights, accused fellow musicians of sabotage, and mocked rival bands in ways that crossed professional lines. Some fans admired it as pure, unfiltered rebellion. Others saw it as another sign that Ozzy's internal chaos was spilling dangerously into his career. Even his relationship with Sharon, though fiercely loyal, could not shield him from the enemies he made. Industry executives who swore never to work with him again, fellow headliners who refused to share a bill, and journalists who went from admirers to critics after finding themselves in his crosshairs. Away from the stage, Ozzy's life was equally turbulent, sometimes even darker than his onstage theatrics. His marriage to Sharon Osbourne endured not just one, but multiple cheating scandals, each splashed across tabloid headlines. Public fights erupted in hotel lobbies, backstage corridors, and even during live television appearances, leaving fans stunned at how raw and unfiltered their battles could be. There were separations and reconciliations, each more dramatic than the last, as if the relationship itself thrived on chaos. His relationships with his children carried their own scars. Years of substance abuse and emotional volatility created deep rifts, and while moments of closeness surfaced, they were often overshadowed by mistrust and disappointment. Some children distanced themselves for months at a time, unable to cope with the unpredictability that came with being Ozzy's family. The glare of reality television cameras only magnified every argument, relapse, and breakdown, turning private pain into public spectacle. Ozzy's struggles with drugs and alcohol were relentless. Even after tearful promises to change, he would spiral back into old habits, sometimes disappearing for days, other times turning up so disoriented that friends feared for his life. The cycle of rehab, relapse, and regret became a grim pattern. Behind closed doors, financial disputes flared, family loyalty was tested, and accusations of manipulation and betrayal swirled. For all his legendary status, the chaos at home mirrored the chaos on the road, relentless, messy, and impossible to escape. The very volatility that made Ozzy Osbourne a once-in-a-generation showman was the same force that could rip friendships to shreds in the blink of an eye. What made him magnetic on stage, those unpredictable bursts of energy, the wild swings between genius and madness, also made him a dangerous man to trust behind the scenes. For Lita Ford, the transformation from loyal friend to outspoken critic wasn't born from one single falling out. It was a slow, painful unraveling, each new wound cutting deeper than the last. One day she'd be basking in the rush of performing beside a rock legend whose charisma could set an arena ablaze. The next, she'd be watching him sabotage his own future in a haze of rage, booze, and bitter grudges. She had stood in studios where magic should have been made, only to see sessions implode under the weight of his drunken tirades, lyrics half-finished, takes abandoned mid-song, engineers walking out in disgust. She'd witnessed tours teeter on the edge of collapse because of a single reckless decision, with entire crews scrambling to pick up the pieces while Ozzy seemed oblivious to the wreckage. There were nights when a minor disagreement could snowball into an all-out feud, leaving even his closest allies nursing resentment. And it didn't stop there. He'd scorch bridges with festival organizers over trivial slights, lash out at promoters over canceled gigs, and take venomous aim at fellow musicians who dared question him, delivering public insults with the precision of a knife. It was chaos without boundaries. The personal bled into the professional into the personal, until the line between them ceased to exist. The demons Ozzy wrestled with in private didn't stay locked away. They spilled into every deal, every show, every conversation, turning even moments of triumph into battlegrounds. Friends became enemies overnight. Opportunities crumbled in his hands, and for those still standing in his orbit, loyalty was no longer a badge of honor, but a gamble with increasingly dangerous odds. For the public, Lita's candid words landed like a bombshell. Fans who saw him only as the Prince of Darkness were stunned to hear such raw disillusionment from someone who had once defended him. But for the veterans of his inner circle, for those who had survived the storms and seen the destruction up close, it was nothing new. It was simply the truth laid bare. Ozzy Osbourne's story was never just about glory. It was a saga where every high came shadowed by a devastating low.